Hi, I'm a Canadian artist, Roxanne Jervis. My Artist at Works t-shirt says it all. I'm an artist, I'm not a technician. One of the things I did was really had to start over on a painting, but I couldn't start over because the painting was already done. So I will explain to you what I had done, and hopefully you will understand. It's not too difficult, really. I took the canvas, I painted all around the outside edges in titanium white, and the whole canvas basically in titanium white. Then I took a little bit of Aigil Brilliant and mixed it with the white, making it just slightly warmer. It wasn't a brilliant color at all, but it was just not pure white. And decided where I wanted on my canvas, where I wanted the highlight, and the highlight of the water with that sunlight on it. So I picked up my palette knife and put some of this color on, and basically went to the 1/3 mark on the canvas and took my palette knife and just dragged the paint all the way down to the bottom of the canvas, and then filled in some of the other areas close to it. So now when I'm painting, I knew exactly where I was going to have the lightness in it, and I could cut into that with the background jut of land without disturbing or having to go back and fill in the color later. Regarding the background jut of land, I took some sap green and ultramarine blue, and I started doing my traditional knife strokes of just coming from the top down to where the bottom of that jut of land is. And on my palette knife, the color was pure pigment. I didn't mix the two colors together. I just put them on the palette knife and then dragged that down through the wet white paint. And it turned that jut of land into a very soft and misty image, which it should be because it's in the distance. That is where I then decided to put the closer jut of land in there, and you will see that on following this. Partway through, I was working on the foreground, and my iPad memory was full, which I didn't notice. So I had started putting color in, and the iPad was full. So when you continue on with this video, you will see that there are a lot of colors added to that foreground. Notice the composition where the foreground is taller on the left side than it is on the right side. This is to avoid making a straight line where your land is coming up to the water. Jervis, and I'm doing a painting for my daughter who has friends who are getting married, and this is going to be their wedding present. The first thing I did, you will see from another video, I put in a piece of mat board in the back to prevent the corners showing up. Then I took my white paint where I knew my highlights were going to be, and I covered all of this with white paint. In oils, you won't have a problem. So this will remind me where my highlights are going to be. So I'll start with the sky, and from those who've watched other videos, you'll know I do a thin layer of titanium white on the sky first, because then it's easier to get in the other colors and shapes. The one thing by putting white on is that when you put the other colors into the sky, the white will tone it down a bit, gives it a softer look of the distance. My hand is actually moving this piece of mat board along the back just so I don't get an edge from the mat board as well. So I have my white in here. I'm going to keep my sky fairly pale this time. I kind of like to have it more on the yellow tinge. So I'm mixing the ever so little Aigil Brilliant, and that's a yellow that will not turn green if you put it up against the blue. So we're just getting this lovely glow of the sky. Before I started, I did a slight coat of paint all around the edges, and I'm going to use that same highlight color down my sunshine line, and it's not very strong, but it's not pure white. This looks like I'm painting it fairly fast, but I've been painting with a knife for a long time, and I know what the colors basically will do one beside the other. When you start painting with a knife, you really need to know what your colors will do, because you don't want to be mixing them a lot. You want them to stand on their own, otherwise they can turn gray or muddy. Now, my background, I'm going to have a little bit of an island jutting out here, maybe a little bit higher, out about here, to break up that light from the sun, and it's just going to be ever so pale, So I'm going to use a tiny bit of ultramarine blue and a little bit of sap green on the blade at the same time. And you see it's a very strong color here, but when I start mixing it with the white, you see how it blends so nicely and it gives you this lovely distance, making sure I don't stop at the halfway mark because I don't want to break up the composition. And because I have paint on the outside here now, it blends nicely. You can see that. And then I'm going to just run a little line across here and draw the colors down that I have there for the reflection in the water. And I didn't put enough white there, so I have to do a little bit of finagling. Now you see what a lovely soft distance that makes. You don't need to do a lot of heavy paint. You just have to let the paint do the work for you. And don't just make a straight line down. Some of the trees will give it a wee bit more shape, and I'm using the heel of the blade to get that in there. So that's my background. Now I want to continue the water in here, so I'm going to have to put a little bit more of that white mixed with the light yellow in it, or the Jaune Brilliant. If you can't make that color, I would suggest you use lemon yellow and the lightest bit of orange and a lot of white just to get that color in. So here we go, because I want that light in behind. I've filled in some more of this area with my white, and I'm going to have another jut of land coming out here, and I want to make sure that wherever this land comes and stops, I want it to stop below here somewhere without stopping at exactly the same point, because then I would have this vertical line. I've done a little bit of touch up all around the edges. Takes some time to do that, so I didn't want to bore you with it. Here, make sure there's no stepladder ripples. See the video on that. These are all trees. I'm putting in a little bit of sap green, a little bit of yellow. Again, they're very, very strong colors on my blade, but as I work them into this tinted white, it will become quite soft and delicate, and I'm not mixing that color on my palette. I'm letting the canvas mix it, let the work mix it on my canvas. Again, I'm going to make sure that these trees go beyond the halfway point, and they do. And I'm going to put in a slight tinge of burnt sienna in here on the slightest bit of my blade. Wanting to make sure that this line does not end at the halfway point. So I'm going to do a quick measure to find out where the halfway point is. And there's my halfway point. So I do not want this water line to end there. Again, it's a composition rule. See my Union Jack video for that. So I'm marking out where I want these lines to come just by cutting into the paint. I have a light outline in the background. You're going to have a bit of variation in tone, picking up a wee bit of the blue in here now, because there are shadows when you look at the trees. One of the things you should make note of is that when you're doing a reflection, the reflection is always darker than what it's reflecting. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be the rule. I'm going to now start on the foreground. I've been doing some more work on here, frustrated for a while, but I've got it there. Now my foreground is going to be very dark, and then I'll be putting birch trees in front of all of this, but I need to weight the painting with color, strong color, so I will be putting really dark colors down here in the foreground. One of the things I'm also watching for is that the height of the underbrush on this side must be higher than the underbrush on this side, otherwise it will tend to create a straight line, and we have a lot of weight here, so we're going to have more weight on this side. Otherwise, this would look really odd with all this water showing. I'm going to have this, the lowest point of this at about the 1/3 mark here, again to counterbalance the other bits of composition. If I have too much paint on, I'm going to scrape some of it off because I'm finding it a wee bit too dark. Now remember, I did paint the underside, so if this doesn't cover totally, it doesn't matter because there is paint there. Always making sure that you get these little corners covered. You'll see I've added all these extra colors in here. It was too dark from how I started it, and it is a summer painting, so I've had to put in these tones. Also, I had mixed burnt sienna with a bit of that cadmium yellow as well, and totally changed it from a dark foreground into one that matched the rest of the painting. With my palette knife, I'm cutting in where I want my trees to be, and I've got one in here and one in here, and I'm going to put another one coming into the back from the back side. I want to make sure I don't have one that's dead center. So I'm going to have one coming straight up here. The thing about scratching your trees in through the wet paint is if you don't like it, if it's too wide in places, you can just come over it with using the colors that are still on your canvas. The other thing you have to be aware of is you don't want all the trees to start at exactly the same place. I do need to put another tree in there, but I'm going to wait till I fill these in to see how it works. Now that I have figured out where I want my birch trees to be, this is where I will be doing a lot more detail work on each individual tree. And after that, I will be putting in a lot of underbrush. So I will come back to that in a few minutes. So after much struggling and taking paint off and putting paint back on, I think I've finished this. May have a little tiny touch up tomorrow, but Sarah